This is a podcast about both having autism and living with someone who has autism. My mom is Sonya, and I'm Josh, and this is Josh Has Autism.
Well, hey everybody.
Hello.
Thanks for coming and hanging out with us again. We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
So, before we do these podcasts each week, we don't talk about it. And I don't tell you what we're going to talk about. I don't tell you what we're going to do, so that it's a very a real conversation.
Yeah, raw experience.
Right.
Yeah.
So that you're answering not something that you've prepared, but just how you feel and what you know and what comes to you. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
And today I want to talk to you about bullies and about you being bullied and how that affected you as it was happening when you were in school, how that changed, and if there's any effect that you feel from that right now. You're looking at me. I'm very well aware that I just said 3 different things in one sentence. We'll break it down. We'll break it down, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, there are some things that I know of that you dealt with when you were in school. But from your perspective, and I just really want to hear and understand, when did that begin, that you're aware of that it would be something called bullying, or maybe because that wasn't a verbiage that you had back then, maybe it doesn't register. I don't know.
The earliest that I remember being bullied was in 3rd grade. And there was another Josh. He was a redhead. He was a jerk to me. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, most Joshes that I know that are redheads have been jerks to me.
I remember we talked about that a little bit. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And what happened? What did he do?
Well, it wasn't necessarily him. I just remember thinking at the time that he was just a jerk to me.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other bullies, I totally forget his name. I want to say it was AJ or something like that, but I don't remember.
Okay.
And he was a 3rd grade jock, so to speak.
Okay.
He was athletic, but not... he was smart, but not overly smart. Mm-hmm. But he was very athletically inclined.
Okay.
And he didn't like me. And he would just make fun of me and treat me like dirt. And most of the kids followed his lead. Didn't help that whenever it was time to line up for something, I would dive towards the front of the room, trying to get to be first, and then tell people that it's not a straight line.
Right. So he had his abilities, and you had your abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But your tendency was to want things to be in particular order.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that didn't often go over well.
Yeah.
There's a difference, though, in somebody not liking your behaviors and bullying you. So what I'm saying is that there's not an excuse that justifies bullying somebody else. There's just not. And so whether or not you did some things, and I understand that kids are able to function to the level of their maturity. Mm-hmm. So I get that sometimes things get a little skewed because they don't know beyond their years.
Yeah.
It's not an excuse, though.
Right.
So how did you feel different when those 2 boys were interacting with you? How did you feel different than when other people were interacting with you?
I would try to be nice to them, and they would essentially throw it back in my face.
How?
Like, I remember that we had a kickball field, and even though I'm really good at kickball, they would always choose me last, or not choose me at all. And that's because they would usually be the ones who were in charge of picking teams. And because they were popular, no other... If it wasn't them that was choosing, they would be chosen first. And because of their popularity, they wouldn't choose me, because I just wasn't very popular. And it doesn't help that I was also fairly impulsive at that age. Because, I wasn't on medication yet or anything else like that. I hadn't had any mental help yet.
Right. Or social guidance.
Right.
As well. So it was in 3rd grade that you got diagnosed with autism.
Oh, okay.
That was a very difficult year for you. I know that from what I was getting on my end, conversations with teachers and, you getting kicked off the bus. And
that was when I got kicked off the bus? For what?
The volcano.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. The less said of that, the better.
Well, I think we mentioned this before as well, but I think what happened is somebody, from your perspective, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but I think that you've expressed that it was somebody that was coming at you constantly and belittling you constantly, and they were doing it that day, and finally you just had it, and you just knocked a thing out of their hands that they had worked on, and so that led to you getting put off the bus. So after 3rd grade, did the rest of elementary school, that was through 5th grade. Was there any other experiences that you had that...
In 4th and 5th grade, I went to a different school than I had in 3rd grade. And I became very reactionary compared to 3rd grade. I would react to things that most people wouldn't consider bullying. And the bullies became very adept at manipulating a situation so that I would react, and I would usually react over the top, and I would get in trouble and they would not, because by definition of the school rules, they weren't doing anything that was wrong per se, and I was.
That's sometimes the way that bullies play their game.
Yeah.
Which is to find somebody that's going to react to what they're doing. They do things out of the sight of those that could put a stop to it, or those that would recognize what they were doing was inappropriate. And by the time that, in this case, the teachers were aware of something, they saw your behavior because you were typically louder and very impulsive in the response. So it was very quick.
Yeah.
And so something you just said, I have a question about that. So that if they were doing things that others might not consider bullying, what makes you say that? What makes you think that's the case?
Because just modern day knowledge and experience.
Okay, so back then you didn't recognize that. You're saying who you are today can look back and see that.
Yes.
Okay.
At the time, it definitely seemed like bullying to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just so many little things that would add up. Mm-hmm. And finally, some little thing would finally just push it over the top. Mm-hmm. And I would react.
Mm-hmm. And there was a person in particular, it's like that was his job to bully you. It seemed like it.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very difficult situation.
Mm-hmm.
And he did get pretty good at baiting you into a reaction.
Yeah.
And then putting his hands up and go, what? What do you...
Yeah.
Calm down. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And he knew exactly what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And it was deliberate.
Yeah.
And that was, you had a very, very difficult time. And that was through elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that stands out to you while you were in elementary school?
In 3rd grade, I got the recipe to Indian candy.
Right. Regarding bullies?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a different story.
Yeah.
In 4th and 5th grade, I would be getting in trouble like that.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some days that I just did not want to be there at school. And I love school.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there were some days that I just did not want to be there and have to deal with it.
Right. Yeah. It was a very difficult time because it was at a period where, so you were in 3rd grade when you were diagnosed, but in your particular case, it was something that I think the professionals, in quotes,
mm-hmm.
were just beginning to understand.
Yeah.
And so when they talk about what it is that you need, appointments with a psychiatrist that they were trying to help you to learn to interact in the moment, mm-hmm. medication, and it was just a very difficult time because you were really experiencing going to school and not, I guess, fitting in a way that sometimes it's easier for other people and sometimes it's just difficult.
Right.
And because that bullying became so commonplace, it affected your whole experience.
Yeah.
And I know that I would go up there all the time.
Yeah.
I would be at the school constantly.
Yeah. You should have gotten paid.
And efforts to help, just as my presence, that they wouldn't do that stuff when I was there because I was watching.
Right. If anyone different was in the classroom, they wouldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm. And I remember that at recess you would have a difficult time.
Oh my gosh. I remember one time where I felt like a girl had, the word I use now would be slighted
mm-hmm.
me, and that it at the time I thought it was just this really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I exploded. I spit at her and I cussed at her. Mm-hmm. Big time.
Okay.
And that is a ridiculous response for something so small. But at the time, I was thinking along the lines of, oh my gosh, why are so many people being mean to me?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was a really big deal at the time.
Sure. So your limit had been reached at that point.
Yes.
And so while maybe she wasn't one of the ones that did something on a regular basis, this particular time, on that particular day, you had just had it.
Yeah.
And you just lashed out.
Yeah.
And I understand it's not right. It's not something that I would encourage you to do. Even back then, it's not something I encourage you to do. And yet it's really a difficult scenario when you hear about the torment that you dealt with every day going to school.
Yeah.
And there's another... So as much as I was there trying to help you through that, trying to talk to the principal and the teachers and the school nurse and everybody to help to understand what you were going through, it was a time where I was learning what you were going through as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't really understood. When you were in third grade, the common conversations that take place now across our country,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't happening back then.
Right.
It was not something that was understood, and it wasn't something that was seen very often.
Right.
And so it was like this new territory for a lot of people. And when fourth grade, I went to a parent-teacher conference, and your fourth grade teacher just asked me, she said, "Do you even discipline your son?" And you're saying that your inappropriate reaction to the girl that slighted you was over the top?
Mm-hmm.
I know how you feel. Yes, because that was so ridiculous for a teacher to ask that.
That's unprofessional.
Well, whether that's the case or not, autism was something that wasn't understood.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody understood it. Maybe everybody else understood it. We didn't. We didn't have a grasp on what behaviors needed modified. What was a prompt? What was a redirect?
Right.
I didn't know the language then.
Right.
I did not understand you. We were trying, doing everything we could.
Yeah.
But that's real telling, I think, of a teacher back then essentially blaming me for your behavior. And I thought at the time, I bet you're not blaming the bullies. You know, that she's coming at me like that, asking that question. No, was it my ego? Was I, who knows? But it ticked me off.
Yeah.
It made me really mad that we were struggling through something, and rather than be open to a solution or to be a part of the solution, she just blamed you and I for this. So that if a fourth grader had characteristics that were out of the norm, that was something maybe she didn't understand and she didn't recognize, then it was okay to assume that we were just the bad eggs. And it made me really mad, because from the beginning, you were my first baby, right?
Yeah.
There were things that you did that I didn't know were not quote normal as a baby.
Right.
Because we moved and it was just us. Dad got transferred to a little bitty town in Florida, and we were not around family.
Right.
I didn't know. Like a lot of moms, when their first baby, they don't know what's normal, what's not.
Yeah.
And
can you give an example?
Sure. You would screech, really high-pitched screech when you would get your hands dirty.
Oh.
And I I didn't put it. I wanted you to stop because it hurt my ears. But I would just clean off your hands.
Yeah.
And then that would stop.
Yeah.
You were extremely smart and could figure things out that I had no idea how you figured that out. And then, not to say that other, kids couldn't do that, but what I was told then is that, who's doing that? Oh, Josh is. What? I would hear that from other people, but yet I didn't know that was something that other kids that age were not typically doing.
Right.
Bullies do things in such a way to make it look different to anybody looking in.
Yes.
Than what it truly is.
Yes.
And it seems like their motive is to get a reaction. And with you, that was something that was pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah.
And so they kept at it.
Yeah. Eventually, towards the end of 4th grade and into 5th grade, I started to remember the what the doctor would say about trying to ignore it. Or trying to downplay it or whatever, rather than react to it. And so I would try to do that, but I would keep on being egged on and everything. Mm-hmm. So eventually I would just snap. Mm-hmm. And that's when I would get in trouble.
Right. And, the age that you are right now, the age I am right now, if we just thought about an experience where somebody just kept coming at us and coming at us and coming at us in a horrible, negative way, and it just kept happening, and there just seemed to be no way out, no escape from that. I couldn't really tell you how I would react at my age.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's so for you to be in 4th and 5th grade having to deal with that and trying to deal with that, and you go into an office and they talk to you about it, and then you're in the situation. That's something that, you did a wonderful job doing what you did. I can't even imagine it. Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine that. And it hurts, and it makes me mad that you went through those things. Then you went to middle school. Middle school started in 6th grade, so 6, 7, and 8. Mm-hmm. And that's the year that you had a TSS, Therapeutic Staff Support. Mm-hmm. You had the wraparound services. So we all worked in conjunction, all of us together, with the teachers, counselors, everybody, myself, your dad, you, and the TSS, just in trying to help your experience, because it was the first time you going from class to class. That was the big concern, is how would you function that you have different classrooms to go to now,
right? And
the transition from one classroom to the next,
right?
And I don't really want to focus on that so much as I do, meaning that whole middle school experience, but just to stick on the bullying aspect of it, okay? Mm-hmm. And I know that would happen. Things would happen, and I remember the TSS said that she felt sometimes more like a bodyguard.
Yeah.
And she really helped to keep you safe, essentially, and to have them knock it off. And she was an adult set of eyes that would see what was going on, and on your behalf she would go to the teachers and put a stop to it.
Yeah.
She would also send you home with notes so that I knew what happened that day.
Right. I know as well that whenever something would happen, that she would watch what happened, and she would, as soon as the confrontation was over, she would tell me exactly what I did right and what I should have tried instead. And having that happen right afterwards versus waiting a week to see a therapist, what made such a difference.
I agree. I think we really did. I think that in and of itself is what really made a huge difference for you.
Yes.
Middle school is hard for anybody, but sometimes and she would report back to me too, and it really felt like, and I'm sure it did for you, that it's like you were like, I might as well be wearing a shirt with a target on it, that it happened so much.
Yeah.
One time, I think you had just had enough, and there was an incident in the hallway. And somebody did something to you. Somebody that had constantly been doing something to you. I can't really recall, but exactly what they did. They either pushed you or bumped into you with their shoulder as they went by.
That actually, it was the end of the day. And they had been bullying me, yes. And I think it was a redhead named Josh.
I don't know.
And my locker was at the far end of the school. At the end of the day, my classroom was towards the entrance of the school.
Okay.
So to get to my locker, I had to go essentially upstream, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
To get to my locker. And so we bumped into each other. So he said, "Hey." I turn around and he punches me in the sternum.
Right.
Out of reflex, I backhand him in the face to try and get him away, And the whiplash from that gave him a fat lip and a bloody nose, I later found out. So, but I just kept on, I did that, I turned around, and I kept walking. Then we get a call, and I had the only in-school suspension I had in middle school because of that. Because I had a reflex reaction to a physical confrontation. And I only had it for one day. I think. Might have been 3. I think it was 1 though. And he got it for like a week or 2. Because the teachers understood that what my situation was, how I reacted was not to hurt him, but it was an accident that just reactionary thing.
Right.
And because I had such a good reputation with the teachers and with the staff there, because the TSS had already gone home at that point.
Well, I think what your reputation turned, like it was amazing when you were in high school.
Yes.
So to fill you in on the behind the scenes of what you just described, was that they were going to give you an equal amount of suspension. Okay, because you gave somebody a fat lip and a bloody nose, and between that TSS and myself, there is no way that we were going to sit back and have she vouched for you bullying, I vouched for you not being violent, and we both said, take a look at this kid and see what he's done. How many reports have been put in against him? How many times have we said to you, this kid is a problem, and he's trying to start something here? And when they were going to give you this punishment, we didn't let up. And I certainly never let up. And when they said that they can't just do nothing, then I agreed to 1 day. I agreed to 1 day, and that was it. Because yes, did you put your hands on somebody? Did you cause physical harm? Because then other parents are involved. Hey, my kid has a fat lip and a bloody nose. You know, I couldn't just say, yeah, because your kid's a jerk. Believe me, I said much worse than that. But dealing with the parents, you know, I kind of had to be, you know, have a cooler head when it came to that.
Yeah.
Because did you cause physical harm to them? Yes. Did they start something? Yes. And had they continued to bully you? Yes. So, behind the scenes, the reason it worked out the way that it did is that your TSS and myself would not back down on your behalf. And it was absurd that they wanted to make this an equal punishment. It was absurd.
Yeah. And that is another point I'd like to make, is that it's not just me that's having to learn and deal with things. It's having the support and everything else of you and everyone else who would help that really made it so that I am okay now. Or at least as far as okay can be.
You make me cry. Something, I mean it too. Look, I'm crying like a baby. Something pretty amazing happened when you went to high school. 9th grade, well, it was kind of rocky.
Yeah.
10th grade, there were some issues with Grandpa being sick.
Yeah.
Other than that, high school was a pretty good experience for you.
Yeah.
And this amazing thing happened that once you got into that setting, the principal was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
For the first couple of years of your middle school, the principal was a jerk.
Yeah.
And we all kind of, the parents, and we really worked to get him out of there. He had no business working with kids.
Yeah.
He just was not reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
The teachers in the high school were just wonderful people that cared about all the kids and just valued the opportunity to teach and to help students be the best that they could.
Yeah.
Well, this amazing thing happened then, and that is that you began to have a life where you were not bullied like you used to be, and you began to stand up for the people that were bullied.
Yeah.
And it was pretty remarkable. One time I got a call from the principal. He said, so we knew each other. He called me by my first name because we had been up there all the time. So he called and he goes, so listen, this is not, nothing happened. Nothing's wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm like, whew, okay. Now I can listen to what you have to say. He said that there was a big football player picking on another student. He said, and I saw that happened, and I was going to intervene. This is his words. Mm-hmm. I was going to intervene, and Josh put himself between that huge football player and the person that football player had been picking on.
Yeah.
And Josh said, "Leave him alone." And he said, he goes, "I don't know if I would be comfortable doing what he just did." But he goes, and I was heading to, and still continuing into the situation because I didn't know what was about to happen. I didn't know if somebody was going to get punched or what was going on. And he goes, to my amazement, the football player backed away. And something changed. And that is that, not that every day, every step of the day was a smooth one for you.
Right, because it wasn't.
No. But as far as being bullied goes, people began to see who you were. And the people that have the tendency to mistreat other people, they continued.
Yeah.
So not everybody was cool.
Right.
But what did happen is that the essence of who you are was seen. And you began to be supported by not only the teachers, but the students that were cool people.
Yeah.
And you became well known. Not that you were friends with everybody.
Right.
Because, even then, your entire life, your best friend is what the book you're reading.
Yeah.
But anywhere we went, people would be driving by and they'd hang out their window, "Hey, Josh," and everywhere we went, we saw people that knew you and they were saying hi, and and people were kind to you, and it was just such a wonderful experience to see you find your way here and to
be socially accepted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it seemed like it was such a weight off of everybody. If you take the bullying out of the scenario, all you had to deal with were the difficulties that you had.
Yeah.
That you had, not that somebody else created, not that somebody else piled on you every day.
Right.
And you began to thrive.
Yeah.
And what I always thought was cool too is that I would get little snippets of information that teachers stood up for you. When they would see something happen that was about to happen, they put a stop to it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like you were insulated all of a sudden and had an opportunity to grow and to do what you needed to do to overcome the things that were difficult for you in life that didn't have to do with these particular bullies. I know your sister stood up for you a lot of times.
Yeah.
She's small, I think now as an adult, I think she's, 5'4", so she's not in, tiny. She's not a big person, but
I think she's a little bit taller than that, but
no, I think that's what she said she is. She wears heels a lot.
Oh.
Yeah. But she stood up for you.
Yeah.
And so you had a lot of people that cared about you and helping you out, but what did that feel like? So that's just the background story. That's away from you. That's this change, this shift that took place.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that feel? Like, what was that like, that experience? Because to be without the bullies, that must have been pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, one thing to note is that the TSS was the only part of wraparound services that I actually requested to try high school without.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out that I thrived without them in high school. Mm-hmm. I couldn't have done that in middle school.
Correct.
But my social interactions with people I mean, there was obviously the different cliques, like the jocks, the preppies, and everything else like that. I wasn't necessarily a part of any one of them, and yet I could flow through them all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was pretty cool like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, the group that I was a part of was more like the outcast, so to speak.
Yeah, your best friend was 6 foot?
At least
8?
6'5", but that's minimum. He would say he was 6'5", but he was taller than that.
I think he was too.
Some size 21 men's shoe.
Yes, yes, and
those boats.
Yeah, and he has Tourette's.
Mm-hmm.
And
OCD.
Mm-hmm. Some other diagnosis, and you two made a pretty good team.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. The guy that you mentioned was being bullied was Travis.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. I didn't know that. I never knew that. So your friend, people don't know what we're talking about. There's a guy named Travis in school that after school became a really good friend of yours.
Yeah.
I would say that he became probably your best friend.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that was Travis. Well.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
I found out later that he's a boxer. So, like he could have taken him, but but I'm happy it turned out the way it did. Mm-hmm. In that he didn't have to fight him at all. Mm-hmm. But I still find it kind of funny because he told me I could have taken him.
Oh, yeah.
So here's a big jock, and Travis has never been a big guy. Mm-mm. He's been about Haley's height.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so...
Right. So he's as tall as your sister is now.
Yeah.
And this huge, football player. But you stepped in, and you did, and from what was explained to me, you didn't give it a second thought. You just did it because you felt it was the right thing to do. So today we've talked about bullying, and the way that you were treated and how you had treated others.
Yeah.
And as an adult, when you're in college now, mm-hmm. Do you experience any of that you experienced earlier on in life?
Not bullying, no.
Cool.
For the most part, if someone even tries something like that, the rest of the school kind of closes ranks.
Okay.
And helps out. Make sure that they know that it doesn't happen here.
Right. It's probably tougher for people to consider bullying you right now, since you're almost 6 foot tall, and your arms are like Popeyes, like they're like so strong. So I imagine that plays a role in it too. I do. Well, Josh, thank you for talking about this today. I wasn't sure how this would affect you, and if that was okay even to bring up.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important. I think it's an issue that goes on today in schools, and people that are bullied have as hard a time as you did.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to hear when schools are doing everything they can to stop the bullying.
Yeah. And one more point I'd like to make before we finish up mm-hmm. is that I had friends that stuck by me. Like David, I met him in 4th grade, and he was my first real friend, and we were hanging out all the way up until we moved from Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I mean, having friends that you can just talk to, and even if it's just to say, oh man, being bullied sucks. Mm-hmm. Don't you agree? Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Mm-hmm. Just having somebody that will understand what you're going through like that mm-hmm. made such a difference.
Yeah. think it's like that in all steps of life. If you have somebody that you can connect with and they can share the experience and understand where you're coming from, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So for you, you had a couple of good friends throughout school that really made a difference for you.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Josh, thanks so much. I really appreciate you being open and available to talk about it. I wasn't sure how it was going to go.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Thank you for all the help you've given me over the years.
You bet. You bet. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we'll talk to you next week. Love you.
Bye.